It's 2025, and I think success has started to speak a new language. And that language is one of confession, it's one of honesty, especially within the pop culture space. So if we think back to the days when our pop stars, let's take our pop stars, they used to be all about perfection, flawless looks, polished lives, no cracks showing. Now, I think it's the opposite. The women who are really kind of making a name for themselves and who are being spoken about, these are the women who are letting you see the mess, the heartbreaks, the burnouts, the real human stuff that perhaps used to be hidden. Lilly Allen, I am looking at you, especially the new album West End Girl, which, by the way, I love. I've been a fan of hers for a long time. I've always loved her music. And this one, oof, it's a goodie. But I think as a public service announcement, don't listen to the album if you are on the school run. I would say it's not PG. Anyhow, I digress. This album is a perfect example. It feels kind of like you are reading Lilly Allen's diary that she's left open for us on purpose. It's very raw, it's emotional, and it's being sold as her most honest work yet. And that's exactly, I think, why it makes it so powerful. So what used to be perhaps private pain for many people, these things have now become a way to connect with their audience, to inspire others, and also, yes, to succeed. And I'm sure the commercial success of Lilly Allen's story and revealing her pain, I think it's probably been worth it for her. But here is where I think it gets a bit interesting. Authenticity, being vulnerable, it's almost become its own kind of performance. Being real, it's kind of this skill, almost a strategy. So if we think about, I don't know, the tearful Instagram post, somebody going live on Instagram, crying, sharing their story, sharing something that's very kind of meaningful to them. And audiences lap it up. They love to kind of feel like they're not alone, perhaps in their own pain. And so this kind of sort of real, authentic, raw content, it's really playing into this new idea that openness equals credibility, and these moments of honesty, they build trust, but they can also blur into brand building. So being open and raw and honest and vulnerable is a way for women to build their personal brand and ultimately build their success. So what I mean by it can also blur into brand building is that sometimes when people share something genuine or emotional online, it's hard to sometimes tell whether they're doing it purely to connect or perhaps partly to promote themselves, maybe a bit of both. Now, I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing, because for many women, whether you are a pop star or a leader or an entrepreneur, the shift is actually very empowering because we're no longer told to be perfect or to hold it all together. Instead, we're learning that strength can look soft, success can be a little bit messy, and we're not robots. Power isn't about hiding our emotions anymore. It's about knowing how to share them with purpose. And so that's what I really want to explore here, because like Lilly Allen, we get to choose what parts of ourselves we can reveal and how we tell the stories. So it's not about oversharing or performing vulnerability. It's really about using authenticity as a tool for impact. And this is what modern leadership looks like for women, this blend of strength and softness and truth and power. I'm Dani Watson, and welcome to She Leads.
Welcome to the She Leads podcast, a space that empowers women like you to build success in a way that feels authentic, energizing, and aligned with who you really are. In a world that tries to convince us that success means hustling harder and following everyone else's rules, we're here to rewrite the script. This is about success that feels nourishing, not depleting. Success that brings the fulfillment, impact, and recognition you deserve, whilst ultimately giving you the financial power to create the future you want and inspire meaningful change in the world around you. Make sure to hit the follow button so that you never miss an episode, and come and say hello on Instagram. You can find us at she_leads.academy. Let's dive in.
Hello, ladies, and welcome to a brand new episode. So listening to Lilly Allen's album then, it's got me thinking a lot about just how women, I think, how much power lies in our emotional honesty, but also how our success can often depend on how well that honesty is performed. And I don't think this just relates to women, famous women. because I've seen this play out as well with women that I've worked with. So a really good example of this, I had a client who was a very natural storyteller. She was somebody who was very confident, she was expressive, she had this very magnetic presence, and she was able to really talk about the tough parts of her journey and do so in a really captivating, emotional way. Not necessarily via oversharing, but just letting people in, letting her kind of truth come out. And her honesty, it felt very real, but it was also very beautifully put together because she was very eloquent, she was very confident and composed. And she was really able to kind of turn her story into these experiences and share them as lessons with the people who perhaps needed them. But then I had another client who had a very powerful story as well. She'd rebuilt her whole life after a messy divorce, and she'd started a business from scratch, and she'd made it work against all of the odds. But when she tried to talk about this, her story, she'd often just kind of skimmed through it very quickly. She wasn't very confident at kind of speaking online or speaking in front of an audience. And she didn't necessarily realize that her story, the story that she was kind of trying to rush past, was the thing that would actually inspire people the most. Now, both of these women were very genuine, but one of them knew how to tell the story in a way that people could really connect with, and the other had the story, but she hadn't really learned how to own it yet. Now, I think in many ways, vulnerability, it's not always empowerment. It can sometimes feel like this expectation. Where on the one hand, we're told to be authentic and to be more vulnerable. And I think a big part of that's true. That's kind of how, we step into our power. But the industry, whether that's the pop industry or the online coaching industry or kind of any business nowadays, which is really demanding a personal brand be at the forefront, the industry and I think the audience demand this kind of endless performance of transparency, and genuine emotion becomes this resource where we have to mine it, we have to market it until every single pain has to have some sort of PR strategy. And I think it's this subtle but quite persistent message to women that your strength lies in your vulnerability, but only if that vulnerability sells. And again, it doesn't stop at pop culture here. This same logic, I think, is shaping workplaces, leadership. It's dressed up in this language of empowerment. So women, professional women, are told to lead with vulnerability, for example, embrace authenticity. And yes, it's powerful advice until it starts to sound like another performance. Because what happens when openness starts to feel like an obligation? So something that I've definitely witnessed with my clients, so female leaders, founders, business owners, the challenge is, well, how do I embody my feminine power without it turning into another costume to wear? So authenticity, it can't be faked, but it can be framed. And that's where the danger lies. So no, you can't pretend to be authentic. People usually feel when something's not real, but you can shape your authenticity to look a certain way, especially on social media or in business where everything is curated. So a good example of this is somebody posting a candid photo, but that candid photo actually took 20 million attempts. Or maybe sharing a vulnerable story online, but that story has actually been edited to sound perfectly imperfect. Or just happening to be by your phone to record something as, your tears are flooding down your face, or writing about a failure, but only after it's safely in the past and no longer feels very risky. So that's what I mean by framing authenticity. It's presenting something real in a way that's still very controlled or polished or strategic. And this isn't necessarily about being dishonest, but it can start to feel performative if the intention shifts from connection to attention. And I think that's where the danger lies, when people are showing up to be authentic as a way to get attention rather than just trying to connect with an audience. I think true feminine strength isn't about spilling your heart out to everyone or just constantly proving how real you are. It's about being grounded. It's about leading from a place that feels honest and true to who you are. Now, you don't have to share every single struggle or emotion to show that you're authentic. In fact, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not share anything. It's to pause and to breathe and to respond with intention instead of reaction. Now, I think we live in this age where emotional exposure has become some kind of social currency. So if we think about influencer culture, it rewards openness and tears and breakdowns. Pop culture, it turns confessions into this kind of entertainment. And we absolutely lap it up. Women love it. When other women open up, for example, when they share their pain, their struggles, their truth, we call it brave, we call it inspiring. But then maybe a few scrolls later, we're already on to the next story, the next confession, the next woman pouring her heart out online. And so what started out as empowerment often gets turned into, again, this entertainment. Now, the problem is when every emotional moment, it becomes content, something real can actually get lost. Vulnerability, it starts to feel like this performance, and women's stories, their heartbreaks, their lessons, even their healing can become a part of endless cycles of consumption. And then what tends to happen is the more that a woman opens up, the more people want from her. They want more insight, more pain, they want more stories, more realness. And it can kind of feel never ending. I think true feminine power is not in just being perpetually open, but in actually selective transparency. So knowing when to let the world in, and perhaps knowing when to protect the parts of yourself that don't need to be witnessed to be real. And maybe that's actually the new definition of success, finding this balance between expressing your truth, being vulnerable, being authentic, and actually preserving parts of you. So we live in a world which asks women to give everything. And so then this act of holding something back can actually be quite a radical move. Now, what I also wanted to touch upon is what happens when a woman profits from her own vulnerability, because I'm pretty sure Lilly Allen is making a pretty penny or two from her new album. So I think this is where the story can perhaps take quite an interesting turn. So this is where the woman who is maybe building a business or a personal brand or maybe a coaching practice around her lived experience, that vulnerability can actually be a part of her financial success. So we can see this very, very clearly in the coaching world, for example. Vulnerability is the currency for connection. So coaches, mentors, thought leaders, they often build trust, not by pretending they have it all together, but by revealing that they perhaps once didn't, maybe still don't. So they are sharing their breakdowns that led to their breakthroughs, or the burnout that birthed their business. And this, I think, is a very incredibly human and an effective way to lead, because people don't just buy information anymore. They buy energy. They're buying into you. And yes, this is a beautiful thing until it becomes a trap. Because when vulnerability becomes a part of your brand, it can feel very easy to feel like you have to keep feeding it. So you feel like you have to share more vulnerable posts, more stories, another lesson, another breakthrough, another moment of exposure. And then you maybe start to wonder, where does my growth end and where does my marketing begin? Now, for women in leadership or business, this is this kind of paradox where authentic connection, yes, it builds trust, but endless transparency, when we're showing everything online and constantly being authentic and vulnerable, this can actually build fatigue. And I don't think true feminine power is this constant confession. I think our power is in discernment. So you can be deeply real without being endlessly revealing. I think there's a difference. And I think you can very much lead from the heart, but without handing over every piece of your heart to your audience. And I think the most magnetic coaches and female leaders know this. They don't necessarily hide their stories, but they share them with intention. Not as this spectacle, not as entertainment, but as service. So their vulnerability doesn't necessarily demand attention, it invites resonance. And I think this is the difference between performing our pain, performing our vulnerability, and actually embodying the wisdom of our vulnerability and our stories. So I think empowerment through vulnerability isn't about exposure. I think it's about ownership. The power comes from not how much you share, but from knowing that you decide what gets shared, when it gets shared, and why it's getting shared. And I think this is where authenticity stops being this performance and starts being this form of our own authority. So for women who want to lead and build and succeed through authenticity, I don't think the goal is to bear it all. I think it's to show up with intention. So vulnerability can be a very powerful tool in your business when it's guided, not when it's just given away. So yes, it can create trust and it makes people feel seen, but it should never cost you your sense of self. So yes, of course, be vulnerable, but do it with intention. Share your story, but do it in a way that feels right for you. Let people see you, your heart, but remember that your heart still belongs to you. There's a power in openness, yes, but there's also power in privacy. And authenticity, it doesn't mean spilling everything or being raw just for the sake of it. It means knowing yourself well enough to decide what parts of your story are ready to be shared and what parts still need to stay protective. And that's not hiding. I think that's just healthy, a healthy form of authenticity. And I think the most magnetic kind of authenticity comes from women who are self-aware and they're grounded and they're sharing from a place of confidence. They're being honest, but they're not oversharing. Real feminine power is not in how much you reveal, it's how confident you stand in your truth. It's knowing that you don't need to perform to be seen or overshare to be trusted. You just need to show up as yourself, intentional, imperfect, and unapologetically real. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode, ladies, and I will catch you on the next one.
If today's episode lit something up in you and you are ready to build a coaching business that not only changes lives but creates the income and freedom you deserve, then right now you can request a free trial of our She Leads Academy coach training. To get your free trial, just head over to Instagram and visit us at she_leads.academy. You will find the link to the free trial in our bio. I cannot wait to see what's possible for you.